Hello to all of you out there. Thank you so much for joining. We will likely get rolling. We'll give about 30 more seconds for people to um, also join us. This is being recorded, so they will also have a chance to see this a bit later on as well. I am coming to you from Geneva. Where is everybody from? All right, Atlanta. Nice to see you, New York. Hi, Judy. Uh, Orlando, Ontario. Nice. A fellow Canadian. That's great. Hi, Rose. Look, thanks everybody for joining. Let's get started. I am just going to minimize this part of the screen. Boston, great. And there we go. All right, everybody, grab your coffee, your lunch, your dinner if you're here in Europe, whatever you need. Thanks for choosing to share your really busy schedule with me. I know comms is always busy. That's just the nature of the job, of course. Hi, Jerry. I'm Brent Kerrigan, 20 years writing speeches, comms, leading comms teams in government, international organizations, and businesses as well. Six of them with the UN Climate Change Secretariat and several other firms along the way as well. Now, these days, as you may have guessed, I train communications teams around the world to use AI without losing their judgment, their voice, and really their souls in the process. So, here's what the promise is for the next approximate hour. Five practical fixes, all usable by the time we're finished and all built for communicators. But I want to do something a little bit larger as well, and I didn't really talk about it in the promotion for this. But by the end of all of this, I really want us to start thinking about using AI in a different way to change the way we work with it. Because by the final demonstration or the final fix that we're going to be looking at today, AI is not going to be just sort of waiting around for our instructions, right? A simple prompt in and a prompt out. It's going to be questioning us, it's going to be challenging us, and it's going to be even rehearsing with us. That's the fix number five. I think you're really going to like that one. Some quick housekeeping as we begin. Please do save your questions. We'll take them at the end because I'm juggling about three different screens, and to keep an eye on the chat, it's a little bit confusing logistically. So save those questions. We'll get to them. Don't worry. The mics are muted for now. We will certainly open them up later. When we're done today, I'm going to send you some slides and a handout with some extra exercises on it, as well as the recording. So don't worry if you miss anything. What this isn't really, though, to put it delicately, it's not really a debate about whether comms communicators should be using AI, right? That ship has kind of sailed. What we face now are a set of different kind of challenges because AI is already in our workplace. Love it or loathe it, it's there. We have to deal with it. The challenges we face today are different, right? We've been handed these powerful tools and they seem to change by the week. I know, sometimes by the day. And they're so complex and daunting that many of us really struggle to figure out how to actually use them and to use them well. And so we don't often, try to grasp their full capabilities, right? We're sort of dabbling a little bit here, a little bit there, this model, that model. We're chasing the latest ones. And really, this isn't just my opinion. There is some data, at least some basic data that we're starting to look at that really backs some of this up. I'm going to share some numbers with you. According to the European Central Bank, they recently did a study. The research finds that AI use is now widespread among Euro firms, about 70%, right? And that's good news, right? People are using it. But the actual intensive use is a lot rarer. That's at about 7%. So, in other words, a lot of us have the systems installed, but we don't necessarily use it the way that we could be using it. So the tools really are everywhere, but yeah, integrated use, not so much. But again, it's not necessarily the fault of communicators, right? Most organizations, what are they doing? They're handing you a model, right? Big fancy model, tell you to be careful and say, go make some magic, right? No real guidance, just a lot of restrictions that they're throwing out in front of you. I'm sure that sounds familiar to some of you. Now, it's the same with company AI policies. We do workshops with communicators, we do monthly workshops, and I hear this all the time that there's no leadership at the top. They simply talk about having AI. They want to AI, as they put it, but there's no real guidelines around it, no guidance. You could drive a truck through some of these AI policies. So, again, not entirely your fault. So people do what people will tend to do. We sometimes will work in the shadows, right? But it's a real risk to our reputations. It's a risk to speakers' reputations, and overall, the what the speaker is trying to get across as a message to the audience they're speaking to. And there's another issue, and it's a bit of a preamble to the five fixes, but I think it's one that we really need to discuss and at least take into consideration. And that is communicators used AI differently than most people, right? It's not the same thing for communicators because communications, when you really think about it, it's not one single task. Our tasks mix, complexity, dealing with data management, analysis, facts and figures. We have to deal with accuracy. Those things AI handles well. But when we're dealing with creativity, right? Well, AI generally is about as creative as a bag of potatoes. And that's really where we're struggling, I think, with using AI as part of a comms team. And maybe you feel that way as well. We'll have a chance to discuss at the end. And I'd love to hear about your challenges as well. But let's take a look at what I mean. I want to illustrate this a little bit more and take one comms product. And I would say let's look at a speech because it's what I'm familiar with. And think about all the different things that go into a speech to make it a success. All right. You have to factor in things like the request, the audience, the research, the tone, the timing, and about a dozen other ones that are on this slide. Right. But it also has to inspire, reassure, persuade, and move people to act. So if you write a prompt like, write me a speech about X and you're getting garbage back, well, of course you're getting garbage back. There's absolutely no way for it to factor in all of the things that need to go into a great speech with a simple prompt like that. It's not going to work very well. So we need to work with it at every step. And I guess what it's also saying is that our roles really can't be automated, despite what some may say. Far from AI replacing us, our role, I think, has never been more important. We have to think about any comms product as, I would say, a link in a chain, right? At every link, we have to think about, well, we have to apply judgment, right? We have to provide context. We have to evaluate veracity. So let's keep this in mind. I think at the very base, and yes, we're getting to the fixes in just a moment, let's keep this in mind. AI strengthens the link in that chain that I was talking about, but you remain the chain itself. It's as much of a mindset as anything you're going to learn technically when it comes to AI. It may be a complex tool, and it certainly is one of the most powerful that we've ever seen, but it really is just a tool. All right, so let's dig into those five fixes. And I mentioned this at the outset, and if anyone didn't mention, we will have a chance to get to questions a little bit later on. I won't be monitoring the chat necessarily until the end. So fix number one, for me, we are starting sort of at a basic level here, and yet not, right? So the fix is stop engineering, stop prompt engineering. We have to start prompting with intent. Right? The AI models that we're dealing with right now, they keep evolving and they're extremely powerful. And there are millions of so-called formulas. I know you see them on LinkedIn, you see them on whatever social media that you're following. and they all promise solutions. But the one thing that you absolutely need is intent. When a prompt fails, and I see this all the time in workshops or when I'm working with another communicator, it's almost always a problem of intent. I can't say it enough. It's not a magic box. It doesn't automatically know what you're trying to achieve, what you know that it doesn't, who the work is for, or what you even refuse to accept and what you do accept. Right? So that's how we end up with, a vague prompt like summarize this sustainability report. And where you haven't provided any details, well, the AI model is going to paint by numbers. You give it an empty canvas and I say it's going to paint. That's how we end up with a lot of the hallucinations. Now, trying to figure out our own intent when it comes to a prompt is not cut and dry, right? We have to really understand what it is that we want out of it. And at the end, we're going to look at a prompt that I'm going to give you that I think will help suss some of that out for you. And that is going to help make these prompts much more intentional. All right. Let's take a look at some of what you know, but look at what I'm talking about with intent. So 6 elements of a prompt with intent. And in fact, I don't even call it a prompt here. I call it a brief. I think it's much better to think in that way. We know some of these. You're familiar with role. You're familiar with task, audience, format. The 2 I want to concentrate on right now, though, are context and instructions. Really, these are heavy on intent. At least this is where you can get a lot of that stuff in there. So context, the backstory that the AI can't otherwise know. I'm talking about the speaker, the moment, the stakes, that total environment around the speech or the op-ed or the communication strategy, whatever it is that we're trying to produce. The other thing I want to point out are the instructions. These I never see in many prompts. And these are the guardrails. Here's what we want to avoid. For example, if we are writing a speech for, I'm a Canadian, so I'm going to use the Government of Canada. If we are writing a speech talking about finance in any way, and we're the finance minister, and we're going to revisit the finance minister in just a few minutes, but let's say we don't want to mention in our speech anything about the trade dispute with the United States right now. Hard to get around, but let's just say for the sake of argument, we don't. That's where we would put it. We would put it in the instructions. We have to provide some of those guidelines. All right, this isn't a formula. You can put these in any order that you want. This isn't computer code. It's not going to blow up if you spell something wrong or put something in the wrong order. And I say this because I know there's some people on the call who are really just beginning their AI journey, and this is important to remember. But let's focus on, let's focus on a real example and see how this looks in a prompt. And I think we'll take another scenario and one that I hope is familiar to you as well. Let's pretend we're writing an op-ed, right? It's due tomorrow, but the executive assistant sends us an email, very few details. I know this hardly ever happens, right? But we're going to build a prompt that asks AI to build a speech request form. Yes, I know, very simple. We could probably do it ourselves, but this is about seeing what a prompt looks like. So let's take a look at the request or the prompt that I put together. So role, task, again, we're familiar with that. Most of the time, a word or two will do. You don't need to go on about role and task as much as we did even 3 years ago when AI came on board. Context, let's look there. The context here, we want a request. The request that we got was sparse, right? It hardly had anything in it. The person that needs to fill out the stuff we want is extremely busy, little background and comms, and no time to spare. If we look at instructions, again, we're focusing on 2 areas of intent. Instructions, keep it simple, keep it quick to complete, no more than 7 to 10 questions, nothing a non-specialist couldn't answer. And so that's a very, very quick look at how we can start to put intent into our prompts. Notice that it starts to look more like a briefing, not a code. And let's look at the final product that we would get. I actually ran this. Now, it's not going to look like this coming out of whatever AI model that you're using. But again, it's generally got what we asked. We asked for publication, argument, why now, author, all of those things. And it provides some tips to put in there. Now, of course, you can modify this as any questions that you want, you can put in there as well, and it will work just fine. Okay, so for the takeaway in this first fix, really, it is about better prompts are detailed briefs, and they are built on intent. So let's get those into our prompts more and more. And really, once this is a base. These work for simple prompts, but they are the foundation for what we're going to do to set up assistants. I'm talking here about, a GPT, a project in Claude. This is gems in Gemini, spaces in Perplexity. And it also is what we're going to need as a foundation when we get into agentic uses of AI. Assistants, agents, also two very different things. We maybe can get into that a little bit later. All right, let's look at the second fix. Here, it's about conducting research like a field marshal. And really a subtext here, not accepting whatever the hell AI delivers to you as its first response, as a copy, paste, and in it goes into a document. Not necessarily saying a lot of communicators do that, but a lot of what we receive has a lot of that. We all know that AI can conduct research. None of that is new. But where people tend to go wrong, as I said, is that they just copy and paste this stuff into a doc. Now, there's a story I just read, and this is on CNBC on Sunday, and they were citing a study from Columbia Business School that shows that simply copying and pasting AI-generated materials into your products with any critical thinking, without any reviewing, not only makes you sound boring, you're just sounding like everybody else. And look, if you're writing for a leader, if you were hired to write for a leader, do they really want to sound like everyone else? Do you want your product to be described the same way everyone else's is? Of course not. So we have to approach research and different parts of the AI process in comms, really understanding our link in that chain that I talked about earlier. And one of those, of course, is research. So here's how I like to use AI to conduct research: as suggestions, with me holding the ultimate judgment and strategic decision making. We're going to look at this again in terms of a scenario. Let's say it's Monday, it's 5 o'clock, and you know it's coming. It's a request for a product. This time, somebody wants a speech, and they want it tomorrow morning. You've got to do it overnight, and it's based on a 150-page report, nice short report, written by people who seem to get paid by the acronym. Now, in a perfect world, of course, the gold standard is we read that report, we analyze that report with our human brain, and we go through it. And of course, that is the gold standard. It's what we should do. But in a perfect world, also, let's get real. Comms teams have been cut. Deadlines haven't been cut, though. And we're skimming, oftentimes, the executive summary, hoping that, the important fact isn't buried somewhere on page 117. I can tell you from personal experience that, if you are a speechwriter and you are working at conference and you've got 25 speeches to write in the next 2 weeks, this becomes extremely helpful, not as a replacement, but as a check against each other. All right, so I created a prompt or an assistant. You can set it up as both. I recommend an assistant is also a very good way to go. It's called the Research Field Marshal. Now, it's designed to do one job and one job only: to pull the information from a document, right, that 150-page report or whatever it was, and ensure that every fact comes back with an exact page and reasoning. So you can verify in seconds instead of reading the entire report. Not just summarize this document. That is pointless. You are going to run into hallucinations and cherry picked facts that way easily. No problem. But what I want it to do is to not just give me a list of facts and figures. I want it organized in a specific way. I want it to create strategic intelligence cards that I can evaluate, where I can evaluate that data really, really fast. So let's take a look at the prompt. Okay. Field research field marshal. Now, I don't expect you to read this prompt now. This is in your handout. You are going to receive these slides. I described what the prompt will do, but let's focus in on the instructions because really this is where I think its value is shown. We want absolute accuracy, never infer or hallucinate, which is pointless in a way because if we just leave it at that, what does the AI care? Citations, though, the way to catch this is citations are mandatory. We want a page and section for every fact that you give me. Page 14, paragraph 2, so on and so forth. We want human language. We want to convert jargon into clear conversational English. And we want only high value insights and explain why you are choosing each. So let's, instead of staring at a prompt, I want to show you what I received when I ran this on a very recent report, the Sustainable Development Goals 2026 report, which was, released not too long ago by the UN. I'm sort of familiar with this stuff. We had to deal with it when I was at climate change, but it doesn't matter what the report is. Let's take a look and see what it kicked out at us for these strategic intel cards. Now, we can ask for 3, we can ask for 5, we can ask for 10, whatever it is. I'm just going to show one. So, Intel card, takeaway, the world is off track on the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. It gives us a raw fact, which is not bad. The source is where we should have our focus, right? It tells us, where is it saying this in that document? It's on page 2. It's in the forward. Page 3, introduction. Page 4, in the monitoring area, section 1. What it will also do, because we've asked it to do it, is to give us a suggested framing for this. So we could put this into, a media line, or as a media line, as a part of a speech, or an op-ed, or whatever we choose it for. But I do want to point out that this is a suggestion, and I would not necessarily use this in a speech. It's not a bad takeaway, but this is an idea, right? It's simply presenting me with a a list of facts that I can then take away and use. We've asked it for reasoning. It provides that as well. Notice the design of all this. It's not asking me to trust it, right? This is not, we're buddies and we're trusting each other on this stuff. No, no, no. I always take the, standpoint that it has to prove to me that it's in there, not the other way around. And the discipline we have to show, and I have to show, is to verify every single fact against the primary source. It's not good enough for it to just say it's there. We have to go back and make sure it's actually there. That's how we fortify against those hallucinations. So the model tells you where to look. It doesn't become your final source. The other thing, if we're looking at specific AI models that can help with this, I would invite you to consider maybe, it used to be called Notebook LM. This is from Gemini. It's now called Gemini Notebook. This is a very good app for this as well. So do check that out. Essentially, it works as an enterprise AI model where it isolates all these documents in one place and it only draws conclusions and facts and figures from what you're giving it. So takeaway number 2, don't read less, verify faster. Hi, everybody. I think that we got cut off. Sorry about that. All right, let me continue pick up where the Notes are here. All right. So fix number three, if we're continuing along, translating numbers into human. And I know some of us have heard this, some of this before, but contextualizing big numbers has always been, always a struggle for communicators. As a speechwriter, I know this. It's always a challenge. How do we then express meaning and a lot of the stats and the jargon that we get and use AI not necessarily to write that information for us, but as a partner as we think about our drafts. Again, let's think of an example that we can use. I want us, again, I know I'm using a lot of Canadian examples. We've got some Canadians on the call. Say we're presenting town hall points for Canada's finance minister, and he needs to explain to the general public that Canada's net debt stands at around, $1.473 trillion Canadian, right? So that's like 10 bucks American. Kidding. But really, the point is who can picture a billion, let alone a trillion? We need to make this stuff stick. And we've always had to do that, but we just have tools to help expand our thinking a little bit on this. So I want to show you a way we can use AI to brainstorm better ways to explain it. What I've done is I've developed a prompt that asks for three kinds of comparison. And I'll show you that prompt in just a moment. We're going to run this live, always a bit of a risk. Uh, we're going to look for three kinds of comparison. One is geographic, another is economic, another is the human agency aspect, plus a few deliberately offbeat ones, which really are the secret sauce in this prompt, I think, and we'll see why. And I wanted a source for all of these as well. Okay, let me just check. All right. I want to make sure that if there's any issues coming up that we came back from that slight pause. All right. If you can hear me and you can see what I'm showing, can you please put something in the chat? I just want to double check. All right, let's continue. Okay, can't see the slides yet. All right, there we go. I'm going to switch over to the chat GPT. This is, sorry for that little pause. I just want to double check. So here is our prompt that we want to use. You're a communicate. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but essentially we're saying that we're supporting the Canadian Minister of Finance. I don't know if he's really good at explaining this stuff, but for the purpose of our prompt here, we're going to say he has a tough time explaining how much the federal debt is. And of course, $1.473 trillion, I think it was last time I checked. We want it to not only talk about the size of the debt, but particularly the velocity of it as well. So you will have this prompt to look at a little bit closer. Why don't we give this a run and take a look at what it produces for us? It'll take a moment or two. It will go through. It will try and confirm the number, which is great. That's what we want it to. All right, as it goes through, I've made this a lot bigger. That's why you don't see the entire screen. So it says, it confirms a number and it says this is 79 billion per year. This is 20, so on and so forth. Three ways we can express this in scale. A geographic scale. Measured in dollars instead of distance, it would stretch to 1.47 trillion. A number so large it exceeds what people can meaningfully picture. It's about $36,000 for every Canadian. Now, to me, that's a great comparison. People may not know how much, $1 trillion is, but they certainly know what $36,000 is and what that means, especially if we're on a really, really tight budget. Government timescale. Stands at more than 1.4 trillion. It's the accumulated result of decisions made across generations. Okay, I'm going to disregard that one. That's useless to me. I'm not sure people really care if this was across generations. Again, it's really vague. It doesn't really connect to anything tangible. Human scale, it represents obligations, future. I also don't like that one very much. The 36,000 is the one I would probably go with. It nails it, I think. Um, Three ways to convey the momentum or how much it's growing. Well, grows about $1,700 every single second. Again, I like this a lot. People can understand how much money that is. Every day, projected increase is about 218 million. Cost of major public infrastructure projects. Okay, now we're getting into, again, sort of these vague numbers, 79.4 billion. That doesn't do the trick for us either. Now, three offbeat comparisons. I love doing this one because this will often raise things, usually nothing I'm going to use word for word, but it starts my brain clicking in terms of, here's how I can approach this a little bit differently. We already heard about the $36,000. And if we counted $1 every second without stopping, 47,000 years to count that much. I mean, that's pretty good. That's not bad. It depends. You can tell it asks for a 15-year-old interpretation. It's the price of a new smartphone every second. Again, I can work with that. Now, what we see from this is that sorry about that. It is tending, it's a bit hot here and it keeps going on and off. I'll make sure that it. Doesn't happen. I'll try my best to make sure that the numbers I to point that and pasting. These are ideas for us to build upon. All right, I see the audio. Decide what stays and goes and what you develop. Again, this is you staying in the loop. This is you using the tool, not the tool using you. And again, you can set this up as a repeatable prompt, also called an assistant. Again, a GPT project, spaces, what have you. And if you like, I can also include those in the handout, the instructions for setting that up if you're somewhat new to AI. All right, so let's pause for a moment. We've got two more to go, but I want to really point out the progression that we have so far. And the progression that we're seeing is that we're stopping treating AI like a search box. All right. We stopped asking it for information, just feeding us stuff, and we ask it to help us communicate meaning at this point. We're starting the evolution towards using AI for something different that we normally would do so. All right. So a takeaway for this one, I guess, really, it's nobody remembers what $1 trillion is. Nobody understands a big number, but everyone remembers a comparison. Again, I do hear about this from participants. Sometimes I'll get the question, well, isn't this cheating? Is this really a good use of your time? Well, I can tell you, I've got a book about it somewhere behind me amongst the few I have up there, and it is literally how to make numbers work. Right? So we've been using resources to try and figure out how to, put numbers into perspective for a long time. And of course, Google's been our friend on that as well. So none of this is new. It's a different tool we're using. All right, I think I've belabored that point enough. Let's get to number four. So fix number four. really getting into some ones I really, really enjoy now. Let AI play your toughest audience. I want you to start thinking of AI now as a coach. Okay. So it's this fix is one that almost nobody uses, and it may be the most valuable, I think, from a comms standpoint. Like everybody uses AI to write for an audience, write me 5 key messages about X, Y, and Z, but nobody asks it to read as the audience, to role play. And it's really good for doing things like minding our blind spots. I'll be frank with you, working internationally really taught me something humbling. My wife is a diplomat. We've been posted various places throughout the world. It's a new audience every single time, every different place we're in. However worldly I think I am, I'll use an I statement, I always miss things, right? My experience isn't everyone's experience. I come at things with a certain viewpoint. Again, none of that's probably shocking, but often we can't even see our own blind spots. It's not intentional sometimes. And this is especially true when it comes to cultural or gender specific blind spots. We really can miss a lot there. For example, I love examples. Picture an executive arriving by a yacht to a small island developing state to lecture the room about climate change, right? To him, made perfect sense. He didn't fly, you know. So a message like that, of course, it's going to run into some problems, right? That's an obvious one. And I also understand, and it's worth pointing out that AI also has blind spots. This stuff was trained not, equally with equal resources throughout the world. It's usually trained on G7 information for G7 based countries, G20 nations. A lot of its training data based on that stuff. Probably your stuff, actually, since it's trained itself on material perhaps it shouldn't always train itself on. Anyway, but if we use a prompt deliberately to look as an audience member, it can help us surface objections and missing perspectives before the message ever goes out, before anyone else even sees it. So I want to show you a prompt that I've designed, again, can be set up as an assistant, that's going to test one core message from the standpoint of 3 different people. It could be 5, could be 10, however many it is in the audience. I'm going to test that core message from the standpoint of a skeptic, maybe an ally sitting in the audience, and perhaps somebody whom the message leaves out. I'm going to ask it to name the exact phrase that may trigger this audience member or group of people. Trigger is probably a loaded word at this point, but just might get a negative reaction from them. We're also going to look for how they're listening for a message that the speech or whatever it is doesn't address, and how to reframe it. Enough explanation. Let's look at the core message and at the prompt. Okay. The prompt, stop assuming you know the audience. Right. The role, you're a senior comm strategist helping test the message against audience resistance. Okay, enough of that. Let's look at the core message. Data centers, and it's exaggerated on purpose. Data centers powering AI are beneficial for people and planet. The quickest way to leapfrog to a sustainable future. It's time to stop complaining about the energy these centers use and start celebrating the progress that they make possible. All right. I think it's obvious why that might not work, but as I described earlier, we then wanted to look at this from a number of different perspectives. I'm just going to show one I'm trying to keep an eye on time here. Here is the one of the cards that it would feed back to me. So it looks at it from a perspective of the small island delegate. Objection is clear. You're calling our survival a growth opportunity. Great. This is what they're listening for. The trigger phrase, stop complaining. Again, pretty clear, I think. And then a suggested reframe, which I know I'm going to be repeating myself. We don't necessarily copy and paste that into our document. It's an idea framing. Again, it's an exchange of ideas. All right. So this gives us, I think, not a obviously not a draft. This is giving us, I want to make sure I didn't push the wrong button. It gave us an honest assessment, and I'd say, a pretty good one, actually. It's also not spin, and I hear this about it as well. Like, aren't you just trying to really spin the audience? Well, here, the way I see it is that I think it's respect for the audience. It's nothing we wouldn't have done previously in a small group, pressure testing a message. But it's another viewpoint on this stuff. And again, with blind spots, I think it's extremely helpful. It's like having your own personal editorial board. Again, works for speeches, policy announcements, internal comms, anything that sounds perfectly reasonable to the people that who wrote it. Um, and again, we see here how we're reversing the way we use AI. We're no longer asking it to write for the audience, but to become the audience. And that is going to lead us into the final fix suggested for this workshop that I think AI, the change in the way we approach AI is going to help, and that is to stop asking AI for answers and ask it to interview you. Not only interview you, but to act as an interview coach, as a media coach. So it's the largest reversal of all that we're going to discuss today. Again, throwing back the idea that AI is just something we type into and get an output, because we do far more than write, of course. We prepare leaders for interviews, panels, town halls, board meetings, difficult conversations, unexpected questions, that sort of thing. And that's really where our value is very visible, right? It's the moments that it's also where people practice the least. We all have speakers that we've written for, principals we've worked for, who will look at the speech or whatever the product is, talking points, about a minute before they go on stage. A little bit of practice might help, and this might be the way. But I want to practice this one, or to show you how it works live. This, depending on the lag in the system, may or may not work. It's a bit of a crapshoot, so bear with me. I am going to switch us over to ChatGPT. I just want to enter this, and let's take a look. Wrong one. AI tools. There we go. I want you to notice this here. This is the voice mode for AI, and you are going to have to enable your microphone as well. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak a scenario live to the AI. And that scenario is essentially this: we're a leader who has just delivered a speech on AI and jobs. And we're going to face questions from journalists at the end of it. I want the AI to play the role of the journalist. Again, make sure your mic is enabled. Instructions are in the handout, and I'm going to proceed. I'm going to also switch over my microphone so you can hear this as well. Just give me a second. All right, here we go. Hi there.
Hey there. How can I help?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I am teaching a class right now with AI and communicators, and we are interested in giving you a scenario which essentially is going to help me prepare for a Q's and A's after a speech I give. After that scenario, I will then ask you to run me through some questions. That sound good?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. This is exactly the kind of thing I'd love to help with.
All
Go
right.
ahead. What's the scenario?
Sure. So you are an experienced international journalist interviewing an executive right after a keynote on AI. I want you to ask me a challenging question about AI's impact on jobs. After I answer, I want you to evaluate me with a grade: A, B, C, or D. I want you to explain your reasoning for that grade and then tell me what a stronger, more effective response would sound like.
All right. Stepping into character now. Dr. Ellis, you just spoke about AI's promise, but many workers in the audience are anxious. They're thinking, promise for whom? Specifically, what do you say to people who believe AI will simply de-skill or eliminate their jobs within the next few years?
Well,
Go
what
ahead.
what I'm going to tell you may not sound revolutionary, But I really think most people really need to calm down about AI. It's going to create a lot of jobs, let's be honest. And yeah, it's going to take away some jobs. I mean, those are the breaks, right? But when it comes to job creation, our company is way ahead. We create yachts for small developing island states, and we just see such a huge opportunity.
Hmm. That response lands at a D. Here's why. It dismisses concerns with calm down, makes claims without evidence, and pivots to your company's opportunity instead of addressing the workers. A stronger response acknowledges the fear, offers concrete action, and shows responsibility. Something like, I understand the anxiety. History shows tech shifts reshape jobs. Our duty is to help people through that. Here's what we're doing on training and responsible deployment. Success for us is AI and people working together, not one replacing the other. Follow up question for you. Can you name one specific decision your company has made that trades short term efficiency for protecting or investing in workers?
All right, I think we'll end the interview there. We just wanted to do the one question. Thank you very much for your help, and we'll talk to you later. All right, not even a goodbye. I can't believe it. But anyway, the point here is that we can this is not necessarily text-based anymore. I want to also address that this is not meant to replace a great media trainer. That's not the point of this. This is especially helpful if you do this stuff, if you're going to give a speech once or twice a year. This is, I think, going to help quite a bit. Maybe you're a freelancer, can't afford a media trainer. Also, very, very helpful. And I'm sure the wheels are turning. Think about all the different ways you could use this. It's great for practicing a hard conversation with a boss, employee, prepare for a job interview, and all other options there as well. Again, not replacing the coach, gives the coach more scenarios, more repetitions. All right, I know we're going to get to questions in just a moment. I do appreciate the time that you're sharing with me. I want to share the final prompt today, and it's something I promised at the beginning. And for me, this is the most helpful prompt. It's a very simple one that I use that I came across when I was trying to research something, but it is a gem. Again, in your handout. And this is to use AI to interview you before you even give a prompt, to unearth your blind spots, your gaps in your knowledge on almost any single topic. Let me just pull the prompt up if we can get it. Just a sec. There we go. So this is the prompt. Um, it also it's helpful as an educational tool. So let's say we're a policy person and we worked in policy and we're asked to join the comms team. I don't know, for whatever reason, we're asked to join the comms team. And for whatever reason, we're asked to draft a comms plan for an upcoming event. But we have no idea what goes into a comms plan. We know a bit, but not a lot. So we ask it to highlight and to really go through and examine us on what we know and what we don't know, and then to compile a report at the end on where we could do more reading and so on and so forth. So this is really, really interesting. I use it for research. I do a lot of short story writing. And this really helps. If I'm researching something on the Neolithic age and I need to know a little bit more, I run a prompt like this. All right. We're running a bit short on time. So, again, the other thing I wanted to mention about this particular prompt, though, before we go, it's not just about making your prompts better, right? It's about surfacing that intent. You run this through, and it's going to help you understand and really pinpoint that intent you need to get into the prompts that we started out with. And it's going to save you money. These AI models cost a fortune. If you can get your prompt more compact and do it once instead of iterating, 50 different times, it's really going to save you and your organization, hopefully, some money. Okay, so we've reversed sorry, we've completed the reversal I talked about earlier. Started with clear written instructions. Then we used it to organize evidence, create options, and then act as an audience member. So your takeaway on this number 5 fix is don't only use AI to produce the communication, use it as an interactive coach. So 5 fixes, and at no point have I replaced you or made any indication that anybody should be replaced by AI. The other thing I want to point out is that really everything we talked about today, important, but it really was about working for one person. But the larger opportunity, and I know this question comes up a lot, and the larger risk really sits at the team level. When I walk into a comm shop or I'm working with another organization, you can walk in and literally see people running, one person's running a sophisticated workflow, others are running no workflows at all because they refuse to use it, and others are using AI like Google, someone's verifying it, verifying everything that they're running, like we saw with the field marshal prompt, and then others are verifying nothing, copying and pasting it in, and others who are sitting in the corner, sort of poisoning the well for everyone and telling everyone about it. But what we look at in that situation really is a team that doesn't have any common language about how the work gets done. It weakens the chain overall. And real capability begins when a team shares the same briefing standards, verification mandates, audience discipline, voice safeguards, and rules about what information can enter which system. And that's what we build in the team workshops through the Professional Speechwriters Association. That is strengthening the chain, making the task repeatable for all and shared by all. If you want to know more about the team workshops, strengthening the chain, making the task repeatable, the information is going to be in your handout. It's on the screen here as well. And I would love it if you would reach out to us, either myself or the PSA, to get more information on that. All right. We're now at the end of the formal session. Notes and recording will follow by email. And if you need to go now, because I know I've gone over a bit, thank you for joining us and thank you for your time. But if you can stay, I'll remain, let's say, till the top of the hour and take as many questions as we can. If we need to take a little more, I can also do that as well. So let me take this off of mute. Oh, it's already off. If you have a question, do raise your hand. And I have been sent some questions in advance as well. Thanks, Hillary, for joining us. Questions? All right. Let me go to then some of the pre-submitted questions that were sent to me. One of the ones was, we use an enterprise system. Is this going to work on our system? Sorry, Tucker, I'll finish this quick and then I'll get right to you. So will this work in an enterprise system? Everything we discussed today will work in an enterprise system. Some of the web search, anything web search may not work, but when we're talking about things like clear intent, sufficient context, verification, human judgment, those sorts of things, this is tool agnostic, and this really should work in a number of different systems. Please, Tucker, go ahead. Let me see if that works. Go ahead, Tucker.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a double-barreled question for you, I think, but they're somewhat related and they're very tactical. The first is from a lot of the things that you showed, is it important in the prompt writing, brief writing, when you're putting in sort of instructions, to call out the elements of the prompt with the titles, like these are the instructions I want you to follow, as opposed to just sort of stream of consciousness, do this, don't do that, whatever, if it's all kind of, no carriage returns, whatever. And then I think the double-barreled second part is for the things that are like tools that you've built that you want to go back to, like the AI, the research, I forget what you called the researcher.
The field marshal.
The field marshal. What's the what's the place? And I know it's different for every tool, whether it's projects or skills or agents or whatever, but I guess where is that quote unquote stored in a way that you found most effective to be able to go back to and not have to rewrite the prompt every time?
Oh, isn't that frustrating? I know what you mean by that, Tucker. Let me address the first part of that. Do we need all of the sort of subtitles in a prompt like role, instruction, the task? The answer is no, you don't. You don't need to do that at all. In fact, the prompts, the AI models are so advanced right now. Usually, they can figure out how to iterate a prompt better than we can. Right? We're not even coming close to it. The reason I teach it this way is because I think before we can talk about assistance, before we can talk about AI agents, we need to know this foundation so that we understand what's going in and out of it. But intent is the one thing that the AI can't make that. Well, it actually can make it up, but we don't want it to make it up. So we want to get as much of the intent in there as possible. I know the way I prompt has changed quite a bit. Compared to, even a year ago, things have changed so rapidly. Whereas now the conversation is about also what are we allowing access? Where are we allowing access for these AI models in our own systems? And so the conversation really moved along. You asked about where I'm using some of the automated aspects. Sorry. Okay. I tend to I will use them for things that aren't outward facing. So anything that might go out to the public, again, I would never copy and paste anything and expect it to go out. I've made that mistake before, by the way, and I think we all have in some form or fashion. Not too proud about it, but it happens. I use it on things like media monitoring. I need to know each morning what the stories were the day before in AI, and especially as they relate to communicators. So I've set up a prompt. I've tried it. There's variations of this in Perplexity, in Claude, in ChatGPT, where we set up a system where it searches at 8 o'clock every single morning and it sends us a report. I mentioned access. I give it one folder that it's allowed to have access to where it places that information and any other context that I need. So for that non-public facing information, I will use it for those sorts of things. All right. Any other questions? Which tool is one question that I have received previously? ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, which one is the best? And I think it's really important that we stop chasing models. For communicators, a lot of these are operating in somewhat similar ways. When we are looking at more agentic uses, this may change a bit. But if we're looking at prompts that are going to be functional in terms of hunting down information, condensing research, compiling, strategic documents, it all depends on what you're comfortable with and where you're coming at things from. So for me, if I'm dealing with something a bit more data heavy, I'll go with ChatGPT. Claude will be more along design, or God forbid I use it for writing. It is a somewhat better writer, I find, but others feel differently. Gemini, great for big informational documents, condensing them. Copilot, I am going to withhold my opinion on. All right. I want to make sure I'm catching everything here. One more. How about before we wrap things up? We got about a minute left. Da, 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 da. Oh, right. This is one I really liked. So, how do we demonstrate value to executives who think that generative AI produces good enough results for the money? Well, you get what you pay for, right? I would agree with perhaps half of that. AI probably can produce good enough for a huge share of what communicators and communications team actually do, right? That's like the routine, like maybe an email, maybe a routine internal memo, first cut of a summary, boilerplate, press line, things like that. But we will have a harder time arguing that on the basis of speed and cost, justifying our work on speed and cost, because the AI is going to beat us there. What I think is more valuable, the better argument is by talking about what happens, what's the cost of a mistake by leaving us out of that process, right? So I said to somebody had this, they called me and they said, we have a leader who says that a chatbot can do anything that we can do. And I said, okay, let him try. Give him a shot. Guarantee the first crisis that this person has, they're going to come back to some of the communicators, some of the people drafting speeches, so on and so forth. And in fact, we've seen this in organizations. Ford, for example, started to cut away a lot of the quality control, and now they're hiring them back. All right. I am a minute over, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I want to simply thank you, everyone. Like this is really a pleasure, and thank you for your trust in listening. And I look forward to working with you in the future. And I'll send those documents as soon as I can.